Hello and welcome to the Flourishing Introvert Talks with me, Jo Rawbone. This is the podcast that celebrates the natural gifts of introverts so that we can flourish in all situations. Episode 257, The Power of Your Voice. I need to start this episode by calling out some of the myths that persist, in part because they're perpetuated by we introverts. Controversial, right? I know, and it hurts me deeply to admit that we can be our own worst enemy, as don't we face enough of a challenge working within a biased system? So in this episode, I will be exploring why and how we could be using our voices for greater impact, both in business and in social settings. Firstly then, the myth that I'm talking about is that as introverts we can't speak in meetings or to strangers or to our colleagues, on stages, and the list goes on. You probably know me well enough now to know that there's no such thing as can't in my world. I might not want to do something, and if that's the case, that's fine. But please be honest rather than blaming can't. I might not have the skills yet, in which case, if it matters to me, develop them. Don't just blame can't. I might not feel confident to. Again, if it matters enough to you, work on your confidence. Don't lazily blame can't, because can't is an excuse that holds us in a state of victimhood, and I'm no victim. To make matters worse, this myth is reinforced and maybe even held in place by the opinion, belief, and the narrative common to the extroversion bias that loud is better. Fundamental truth number 1. Louder voices do not hold more power, nor are they more influential. A loud voice may initially grab your attention, but not necessarily hold it. A loud voice may cry, "Look at me, pay attention to me, follow my instructions," but it doesn't automatically command respect. What holds attention, commands respect, and lays the foundation for understanding is a thoughtful, structured, and appropriately cadenced contribution. And that, dear introvert, is something well within our grasp, and dare I even say, it's playing to our strengths. Now, I can't deny that those who are lost, leaderless, and fearful will probably follow and even praise the loud voices. I am none of those things, and my belief is that neither are you. We may have been drowned out, but we are not lost. We may struggle to align with some of our current leaders' values, which is why self-leadership is essential. And we may have felt fear, but our confidence allows us to take appropriate and effective action anyway. And making room for us and our voices around the table doesn't mean we are pushing others away. It means we are adding our voices to the conversation without adding noise. We are adding our dulcet tones to enhance the melody in collaborative unison. Our voices add a depth to the conversation that is much needed. So let's continue to explore the notion that our voices add depth and why I might say that. Because of our typical think, say, think communication process, our contributions tend to be thoughtful, considered and grounded in keen observation. Because we tend to notice what is being said and also what isn't being said, we can bring in overlooked points and highlight connections or contradictions. These points often go unmentioned if the pace of the discussion is a bit fast and furious, so it's where we can very definitely add value. This helps to ensure inclusivity, even though, ironically, we may have felt excluded in the past. But that is where we can model how necessary and simple it can be to pay attention to the process of inclusion. And I get it. Because extroverts have that say, think, say way of communicating, they want to jump in before they forget their thought or idea. It's not wrong, just different, even though it can feel disruptive and disrespectful to many of us. In fact, that reminds me that the best facilitators I trained with back in the day and have worked with since were introverts. True facilitation is a real skill, so when many bandy the term around and talk about facilitating training, I know that many are simply delivering content. And that has its place too, but it's important, to me anyway, that we use the right terms. Because introverts like to take our time, our input tends to be calm and measured, which if done skillfully can serve to ease the pace and bridge the gaps between people and their perspectives. So when I talk about introverts bringing a quality of depth with their contributions, I guess I mean as opposed to breadth or width. We are more likely to follow lines of inquiry for completeness than add irrelevant information. That in turn can facilitate meaningful and lasting change. This is what I often refer to as sticky change, as opposed to fleeting ideas that are talked about, maybe even started, but don't embed in behavioural change. So when we look back, things are pretty much the same and the problems remain. Until we find the time to talk about the things that really matter and get to the bottom of issues rather than settling for quick fixes, we are caught in a perpetual cycle of repetition. As introverts, we very definitely have a role to play in this, so I'll be talking more about this in the next episode, which is becoming an introvert changemaker. And we can't be a changemaker without using our voice for good. Now there's another aspect of communication that complements using our voice powerfully, and that's active or empathic listening. This is such an important skill, yet it's one I fear we're losing in favour of scrolling. Our attention spans are decreasing at alarming rates, and people are demanding content and information in ever more nibble-size portions. Bite-sized, it seems, is too much to handle these days. Because effective listening can be challenging, it's something that I cover in some shape or form on pretty much every one of my corporate training courses. I've long since refused to call these types of skills soft skills, as they are anything but soft. They are professional skills, and nothing shows respect as quickly as devoted, or what Otto Scharmer calls empathic listening, which is where we understand the perspective and emotions of the speaker. How often do people really do this? I'm more often witnessing two monologues missing each other as people listen to respond or make their point. And we can go one better than empathic listening to Scharmer's level of generative listening, which he describes as deep, intentional listening that goes beyond hearing the words. It involves listening with an open mind, heart and will, moving beyond the surface, creating the space for a future to emerge, fostering creativity and innovation, and building presence and awareness. I think you'll agree that when we're listened to in that way, it creates the possibility of a whole new level of relationship. Now let me be clear here. I'm not saying that introverts are the only personality type able to practice empathic or generative listening. That would be simply wrong. But our natural communication process, our comfort with silence, and our preference for meaningful conversations or discourse means that it actually comes more naturally to us. I wonder how many of us own that strength and talk about it as one of the things that we bring to important conversations. If we're not, I think we should. Of course, it's unlikely that we will if we're caught up in and playing out the I can't story, so it's decision time. Are you ready to give your voice an airing, to exercise your right to speak, to demonstrate that quiet voices can be as powerful, if not more so, than the shouty ones? Okay then, so here are 3 actionable strategies for you to implement. Number 1, Identify and own the strengths you currently have when it comes to your voice being heard. This is important as it's essential to building and demonstrating your credibility. And credibility, as we know, is one of the key components of trustworthiness. Ideally, it will include you actually speaking, and some of you may prefer your voice to get out there first in the written word. That's been my preference for some time, and I see nothing wrong with that. But here's the rub. At some point, you will need to speak into your opinions, your alternative perspective, or your proposals. And if you're anything like me, writing things first allows me to find the form of words I can stand full behind. And when it does get to the speaking part, where are you in your element? In a problem-solving situation? Using a storytelling approach that takes people on a journey? Short, sharp, no-nonsense factual interventions? All and more are valid, so get to know where you are most impactful. Notice I didn't say most comfortable, because often using our voice and being heard is not comfortable. But that doesn't mean we're not having the desired impact. Remember that confidence is taking appropriate and effective action no matter how challenging it feels, and confidence comes from doing. So start small, so you intentionally build your confidence. As you become known for getting your voice out there, you become a role model for others to follow your lead. Number 2, use what we're going to refer to as selective amplification. This is a recognised practice in many fields, and in essence it means that we get to choose what messages we emphasise. It also means that we give ourselves a break and we're not setting ourselves up to fail or hit burnout. What we're doing is consciously deciding on which message and in which moments we'll speak out. It really helps if these align with your values, mission or purpose. For instance, I have recently written newsletters on LinkedIn following posts or videos by some very influential people who presented a perspective that I considered controversial, and actually, in one instance, seriously misinformed. It would have been far easier to have sat with my annoyance, allowing it to fester, but remaining silent. Instead, I chose to share my views and opinions, knowing that I was opening myself up to criticism and potential trolling. The thing is, though, if I am sharing what I believe to be true and I am owning that belief or viewpoint, people are welcome to share their alternative views. That doesn't make me wrong or them right. As adults, we should be able to hold contrary positions and still have a healthy, respectful debate. Another example is that over the years, I've created a wealth of resources for others to consider and or benefit from. I've done that because I'm committed to enabling introverts to flourish in what we know is a biased system. In fact, I can't help myself now, so amplifying the topic of bias with a view to levelling the playing field for all comes into most of the work I do with my corporate clients. And of late, I've noticed that they will often raise the topic before I do. Proof that my messaging is landing. But it's not just in the workplace that we need to be heard and our needs understood. It's why I chose to create my children's picture book, Quiet is Fun Too. It makes perfect sense for me to help to raise informed children who understand the power and importance of inclusion, as that will almost eradicate the bias in just a couple of generations. I know that sounds like a long time, and I realise that I probably won't be around to witness it, but that's the nature of true legacy. Number 3, I think the final aspect is to choose the right platform. Let's face it, we're not short of options, but some are more ethical than others. You make your choice. Where does it feel most natural for you to share your voice? Maybe it's articles where you can really craft your message, or podcasts where you can also craft your message but do need to be okay with your voice. That took me a while, and now I don't mind it at all. The reason I was concerned initially was being told by a couple of public school colleagues in my early years of being a trainer that my voice was a bit common. That hurt for a while, but I've always loved different accents, so now it doesn't hurt at all. As long as people can understand what I'm saying and don't find my voice so irritating that they can't listen, then that's enough for me. We then get to the arena of live video messaging, including interviews. That's a whole different ballgame, because now it's not just the voice, it's the face too. And I've noticed that I do pull some funny faces. And you know what? I'm human, so that's natural. If you want a perfect automaton who shows no obvious flaws, I'm not your messenger. You see, I don't need to be perfect to rattle the cages of bias in organisations. I need to be gutsy. I don't need to be perfect to take people on their journey from frustrated to flourishing. I need to be experienced. And I have walked the path and have my grazed knees to prove it. So I am a credible guide. And that's more important than a perfect one, whatever the means. All of this allowed me to populate my own platform where I am not censored in the messages I share or the challenges I offer people. I have retained my authenticity, developed my own style, and played to my strengths as I empathise, educate, and empower. Because empowered introverts and educated allies, united in their focus on inclusion, make for better boardrooms, better workplaces, and better homes. So in conclusion, I encourage introverts everywhere to embrace their strengths and share their perspectives with confidence. When we do this, when we intentionally use our voices for good, we help others grow and develop as we ourselves flourish. In a world full of noise, your clear, calm, introverted voice can provide much needed clarity that enables happier individuals who create more inclusive workplaces and communities, resulting in more fulfilled lives. Let me hear you now. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, then please subscribe, rate us and leave a comment, because we know that helps other people find the podcast. And if other people find us, other introverts can flourish.
You are listening to an Intentional Media Production podcast.